And it looks like we are live. Give me just a second here, folks, so that I can grab in our wonderful Facebook pages to get everybody in nice and cozy. Let this breathe for just a second to get green check marks across all platforms. Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me as per usual is my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. And also, guys, you got another face on the screen here. We'll get to that here in just a second. But Erick, first things first, how are we doing, man?
Doing pretty good. Very tired. Getting ready to celebrate the wife's birthday tomorrow, just after Mother's Day, which is oh so great. But yeah, I'm super excited for our guests to join us, and everyone in chat, just make sure you guys get those linebackers and running backs don't matter going.
Yes.
Because our guest absolutely loves that.
Yeah, speaking of, our guest here tonight is Coach Luc Polglaze, Indiana College over in Pennsylvania, Division III school, but has coached linebackers, cornerbacks, wide receivers, running backs as well. Luc, it's been a while since we've had you on the show. You've been on, 3 or 4 different times over the past couple of years. How's it going, man? It's been a long time.
It's good, guys. I appreciate you having me back on. I was actually trying to think about that earlier. I think I settled on 4 years in a row now, but I might be off. But whatever it is, thankful to be back and appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, man. It's always a blast to have you on, dude.
I want to say this is the 4th time we've had you on in 3 years. Because there was 1 year we had you on in the spring, and then there was 1 where we had you on in the fall.
I'm usually pretty busy in the fall. It might have been the summer.
It was like it was like late summer, early fall, like end of July, early August or something like that.
I was going to say it's Alaska, so summer's basically fall anyway.
Yeah, because it was after we drafted Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler, because we wanted to get you on and talk about them and how they fit the offense at the time.
Sounds right to me. Yeah.
It was a great show too, guys. Make sure you go back and check that out if you get the opportunity to. But today we have a great show lined up for you guys. We're going to get into this new Nathaniel Hackett offense, and at least per the reports that we've gotten from him, his own words at the press conferences and stuff like that, with what they're trying to do offensively, specifically up front in the running game. We have a running backs coach who also helps us kind of talk about Javonte Williams and what his fit was going into the Broncos this last season. So it's going to be a gas. Guys, I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. But before we do, got to say hello to everybody here in the chat. We've got Nathan Noble jumping in here, Orange Crush jumping in here as well on YouTube. We've got Paul in the house saying, hey, hello, everybody. Hi, Erick, Lance, and Scott. Always enjoy Coach Luc joining us. Hello, Broncos country. What's up, Paul? It's great to see you. We've got Chase Wellner in the house. Good evening, Broncos country. Dylan Von Arks. Got to give a shout out to Dylan Von Arks, and a congratulations to him for being joined on as an intern, as a writer at milehighhuddle.com. He's been doing a great job for us, moderating the podcast chat and stuff like that, helping out on Facebook as well. So, Dylan, congratulations, and thank you again for joining us, and thank you for the content you've been putting out. My goodness, you've got a couple of really good banger articles, including the one breaking down the schedule that just hit earlier. I believe it was today that article dropped. Nathaniel Cotta saying hola over on Facebook. Dan Ward as well saying hello, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Guys, make sure you guys get at us on Twitter by finding me at Sanderson MHH, and for Erick at Erick Trickel, and also for Coach Luc at Luc Polglaze. Also, guys, at DVDD_pod, that's the podcast account where you guys are going to find out what we're talking about every single Friday. Also, guys, at Mile High Huddle, that's the mother account where you get breaking news and analysis on your Denver Broncos, film breakdowns. I've got a Nick Bonitto film piece coming here right down in the next couple of days. I've just got to finalize the gifts and stuff. So check that out at Mile High Huddle when it drops here in the next couple of days. Anything like that regarding the Broncos, you're going to find it at Mile High Huddle on Twitter. Facebook users, make sure you go to facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. That's the podcast account there. Get yourself in on that conversation on that as well. Now, with that, first things first, Luc, as a running backs coach, what is the first thing you're looking for with a running back to fit into a wide zone scheme? Actually, you know what? Let's break down the wide zone scheme first and what it actually entails.
Yeah, well, the wide zone scheme, the kind of the outside zone trend really started. You think of the kind of the classic is the Broncos teams of the 90s, right? Alex Gibbs is kind of the forefather of that. He kind of brought that with him everywhere he went. The late legendary NFL offensive line coach. And really the premise of the outside zone play is that you want to create kind of lateral horizontal movement. You want to be able to displace the defense, because ultimately inside zone is a very tight play, right? That happens in a very tight constricted space. Outside zone, you're going to find a lot of the same blocks, a lot of the same scheme in terms of how the offense is going to react to the defense. The only difference is that happens on a much wider track. So basically, they're trying to get the defense to flow. They're trying to get them to either overflow or underflow, because the running back can adjust off of that. And the great thing about that is it sets up everything that you want to do, or everything that you can do from a play action standpoint, from a boot standpoint. Like it does a lot to have, elephants on parade, right? The offensive line creating those double teams with quick horizontal steps is going to look like a lot of different things for defense. It's hard for that to read and react.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and definitely that's one thing, like when we, during the draft time and everything, when we talk about lateral agility, ability to out in space, hitting your line marks, it's why it's so important when you're looking at an outside zone scheme. So when, it's been 2 months now since you asked me about coming on, in the first, we were talking about it, and you're making the joke about how you felt like I can't remember how it was, but how we were, it was something along the lines, because we hadn't asked you to come on yet. And we're trying to figure out something. And one thing that's, we know with the topic, it's Javonte Williams fitting it. Everybody's making this assumption that Javonte Williams is going to be this tremendous fit in the outside zone scheme. There's some analysts out there, that Nick Kendall being one of them, just throw him under the bus, aren't sure that he can act, as Jeff Noyes says, can fit into any scheme. Well, last year, one of the things with running backs is the vision, especially in the outside zone scheme, is being able to find that hole and hit it. And that was a big concern with Javonte Williams last year in the inside zone that they were running. The gap stuff is that he sometimes would run and defenders miss the lane. I remember a while ago, you and I were talking about if a running back can actually improve that vision. And you actually opened my eyes a little bit, saying that they can. So if you want to go cover how they could actually help themselves improve their vision.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if I remember quite the magic words that I would have said to change your mind so easily, since I know that's not the easiest thing to do in the world. To me, honestly, the first thing that you talked about, and for me as a D3 football coach, the number one thing we talk about when guys have a difficulty adjusting is the speed of the game. Like, the speed of the game happens incredibly differently at high school versus college, and it happens differently in college versus the NFL. So part of it is just recognizing, vision wise, what's happening in front of you. And the more reps, the more opportunities you get to do that in the NFL, the more you're going to actually be able to read things and see things happening faster. Now, to me, running back overall boils down to kind of three really important things: is vision, decisiveness, and lateral agility. You could run a power scheme, and those three things are great to have. You could run an inside zone scheme. Those three things are great to have. You could run the triple option to a certain extent, right? Those three things are great to have. So you're going to be able to improve your lateral agility, because you're getting into, an NFL environment with, NFL caliber strength and conditioning staffs. A little bit, not everybody's going to go from being stiff laterally to incredibly smooth laterally, but you're going to be able to improve that. Decisiveness, to me, that ties into vision. And so the more opportunities, the more reps these players get as they come into the NFL, the better off they're going to be. And ultimately, you're going to get into different coaching staffs or into different systems with different coaching staffs. They're going to teach you to read inside zone or whatever the scheme is a million different ways. I mean, I can tell you guys from firsthand experience, I have heard off the top of my head, 15, 20 different ways to run inside zone, which is such an incredibly basic day one concept for so many teams. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to learn different ways to do it. And the more exposure you get to different systems, the more it's going to start to click a little bit more for those guys.
Yeah, real quick, got to give a shout out to Lawrence Rivera here. Says, what's up, guys? Just showing some love, trying to watch as much as possible today since I got a cartoon car meet tonight. Well, thank you for joining us, Lawrence. Hopefully everything goes well at your cartoon car meet. Travis Weber comes in, says, good evening, Lance, Eric, Scott, and welcome, Luke. Happy Friday, Broncos country. Personally, I think Javonte should be running back one, but it will be a battle in camp. May the best running back win. And definitely, and I mean, I'm pretty sure all three of us here are expecting Javonte Williams to be the number one running back. That was kind of telling with how long they were willing to wait with Melvin Gordon. Yeah. He's been brought in to be that complimentary back. So it'll be a battle. Maybe Melvin Gordon is able to take over the job, but it's seems to be Pookie's job to lose. So going back to the whole vision aspect of it, what you told me is that you can always coach up vision with just drilling into them their landmarks and hitting those landmarks. So with Javonte Williams, let's just get right into it. How do you see his fit in an outside zone scheme?
Honestly, I think the one thing that kind of jumped out to me from watching the film from the 2021 season is that the Broncos actually ran a pretty solid amount of different concepts. Like they didn't just major in one thing and live within that. They ran, outside zone. They ran duo, split zone, inside zone, counter, a little bit of power. But kind of throughout that, the one thing that jumped out to me first and foremost was just how decisive he was. He saw holes, he saw flow, he recognized that already effectively. Honestly, in some senses for an offense, outside zone is all, and I'll stop myself here real quick. As a coach, to me, like wide zone and outside zone are more or less the same thing. There's some really like minor distinctions, but I kind of use those terms interchangeably. So when he was an outside zone runner, for me, that's an easier play in a sense for a running back because it makes holes, it makes landmarks and cut back lanes so much more defined because again, things are happening in space. Linebackers have got to be absolutely perfect in how they fit the play downhill because if they're wrong even a little bit one way or the other, as long as you got a running back with good vision, he's going to make him wrong. He understands the timing of plays. He understands patience of plays. I think it's easy to say for a young guy coming into the NFL that his timing or his patience could be off. But I think that's one thing where he actually really adapted to the flow and to the speed of the game really quickly. And, in terms of his fit, like he already has a lot of the components that I think are going to make him successful. If I was a real draft analyst, if I was really still in the business, I should pull up my notes from the last time I came on the podcast when I actually talked about him pre-draft when you guys had me talk about him. Yeah. I might have to pull that up and kind of compare my notes from when he was at UNC versus now.
Well, and one of the things that I noticed with him at UNC was when they did run outside zone, which they did quite frequently, quite honestly, his patience in the backfield and his decisiveness. When he did see something, he would let the play develop in front of him. That was something I really liked with him. So it does lead me to believe that he's going to be a fairly decent fit in this offense if they're going to run a lot of that outside zone. And going into last year, when he did run outside zone, he did a really good job. And those were typically the runs where he had his most success in the longer runs that he did have. Now, something else that comes into it is something that you just said, how the linebackers fit. And with Javonte Williams, as far as his vision and his tackle breaking ability, is this something that you can see him break a lot more of those longer runs in this particular kind of an offense?
Yeah, ultimately, it kind of, when it comes to outside zone, it really depends on the guys in front of you. Because if you have offensive linemen who are able to create beneficial angles, and you get the linebackers and you seal that thing, then yeah, you're going to be able to go. Now, if you get a defense that strings the run out where he's still moving laterally, he's still waiting for a cutback lane, and now he's starting to chop his feet because he doesn't have one, that's where that play is not going to be as effective, right? So by design, outside zone is meant to stretch and stress the defense horizontally, right? It's supposed to force them wide. It's supposed to give them difficulties, but at the same time, like the offensive line has to understand the angles of the play, right? Like they have to understand that they're going to try and reach the defender, right? They're going to try and get across the defender play side, and if not, they're going to make that nice and defined for the running back to be able to cut back. So to me, like I think that's one thing that's really interesting with watching him is I think he's decisive, but I think he can almost put his foot in the ground a little half second sooner. And that's kind of one thing where I'm not inside his helmet, right? I don't know if he's having difficulty understanding his reads, he's getting cloudy reads, or he doesn't know what he's looking at. I don't think it's the last one. I think he knows what he's looking at. I would be curious to see from his perspective if it's, vision and just kind of taking an extra half moment for that to translate to him mentally, again, being at a different speed of game, or if that's more getting cloudy reads from the guys in front of him.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he was either towards the end of the season or just after the season in the exit press conferences, interviews that they did. He talked about it a little bit. And I remember him saying that that he was not necessarily struggling, but there were issues there with him adapting to the NFL level with the speed of the game and everything. And UNC, I mean, even Alabama to the NFL, there's a different speed of game there, which is why all this, the worst team in the NFL would lose to Alabama. No, they wouldn't. They'd still whip them because the speed of the game is different and can go into that. But that's not the point of the topic. Anyway, so with Javonte Williams in this go in an outside zone scheme, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here this year. Do you think he hits that? Do you think this is a scheme that he can easily break that 1K rushing mark record provided he stays healthy?
I'm no math guy, but 1,000 divided by 17 is a lot better equation than 1,000 divided by 16. So I think at minimum these days, like if you're talking about a good running back, like, yeah, they should absolutely be able to hit 1,000 yards every year. Like, I think that should be a base expectation. I don't even think 1,000 yards a year is that special anymore, honestly. I absolutely think, again, like, I don't want to say that outside zone is a crutch to a running back, because it's not. It's still an incredibly complex scheme, as any run play is when you're going up against gigantic NFL caliber athletes. But I do think it is a scheme that helps running backs, and I think it's a scheme that he's well suited for. Honestly, like, I think maybe the one thing that he's carried over the best from college to the pros, as I kind of skimmed through my notes, he's still incredibly physical. Like, he does a great job of kind of the technical term is what we'd call getting behind his pads, which is basically he lowers his shoulder, right? He's going to get behind his pads. He's going to allow his pads to do the talking. Like, he's a hard guy to bring down. Ankle tackles just grabbing at him, that's not going to bring him down. No matter what the scheme is, he's going to be an issue to tackle for a defense.
Yeah.
So my question didn't come through like super clear on this. But I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, 1,000 yards in a 17-game season should be pretty easy to hit. Last year, he missed a little bit of action because of an injury. Melvin Gordon did. Both of them managed to break 900 yards, 918, 903, or 903 for Javonte Williams, 918 for Gordon, on each of them on 203 carries. So realistically, I mean, that should be the expectation for him. And it was, my question was more so on the lines of how much the outside zone scheme can like help him hit that mark.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think, like I said, the physicality is there. That helps him. The fact that he's decisive and he's so physical with the way he runs, again, I think those are things to translate for him, but I think his vision is good. I think, like I said, he was a half step slow at times. Again, he was a rookie. Like, he's a rookie who had a 900-yard season. I think he's going to get better. I think those are things he can improve upon. Again, like his ability to get vertical is good. I think with his vision, he's going to be able to do it a half step sooner or a half second sooner. And again, I think that's going to really be able to benefit him.
Yeah. Got a couple of chats here I want to grab. Gary Leeds Palmer jumping in here saying, welcome, Luke. And a shout out to Lance, Eric, and Scott. Scott's not with us tonight. We're missing Scott behind the scenes here, but we'll manage without him, at least for a little while. Hopefully he jumps in here in a little bit. But thanks for being there. Go Broncos and let's ride. And then Travis Weber jumping in here. I think he's got his question for you. He says, with the scheme Denver will be running, who all do you feel will excel on the offensive line and who will struggle? To me, I feel the offensive line is the engine that makes the offense go. And I want to kind of piggyback off of this and give you kind of a two-pointed question here. You had mentioned something about the Broncos this last year and their offensive scheme, running multiple different schemes in the running game, like specifically duo, a lot of gap stuff. They ran counter, they ran some wide zone, some inside zone, stuff like that. As far as the offensive line getting into a rhythm, is that a good way to, get them going and continue with the consistency? Or is it better to have that one identity where you can, instead of saying, on this look, we're going to run this play, or just say, you know what, to hell with it. If it's 3rd and 3, we're running outside zone. If it's 1st and 10, we're running outside zone. Is there a situational play call that you think running multiple different schemes benefits, or do you want to have that singular identity?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I don't want to oversimplify offensive line play because I have several good friends who are offensive line coaches who are probably going to be waiting behind that door right there to take care of me if I misspeak here. But at the end of the day, like offensive line play, if you boil it down, there's double teams, there's pulls, right? There's single blocks. Offensive line boils down to a bunch of schemes that more or less are the same fundamental components, the same fundamental building blocks. So to me, if you have an offensive line that struggles to communicate, running a lot of different things is going to put a lot of strain on them, right? It's going to put a lot on them in terms of being able to communicate, all being on the same page in terms of them all understanding the angles. At the same time, if you run a lot of schemes, if you're a defense and you're seeing split zone, you're seeing counter, you're seeing insert, right? Those are all three plays that look similar, but they function very differently in terms of what's happening in front of you and how you have to fit the run. That's not even getting into power, counter, outside zone, like duo, all of the rest of it, right? So I think there's a trade-off. I do think you have to have a number of schemes. You can't just be a one scheme team, but I do think you have to have a bread and butter that when you say, all right, what are we going to run? What are we going to be best at? You have to have something that you can go back to at the end of the day. But I do believe there has to be some variety. You have to have some ability to say, all right, we're not hitting them on inside zone today. Let's see power. Let's see how they react to pulling guards now.
Yeah, exactly. And that was an issue last year, is that you have to have enough of an identity, enough of a speciality that you can just turn and rely on that. But you want to be able to keep defenses guessing, as you kind of touched on there. And last year, that was the big issue, is that it was such a mixed bag, such a grab bag of the running offense that players started speaking out against it. I think Garrett Bowles, Dalton Reisner, and Graham Glasgow all at one point mentioned about how they're being asked to do way too much in the run game just because there's no identity, and lacking an identity on the offense was just a big issue for so many people. Again, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, since we kind of I asked you specifically for running backs and wide receivers, but the Travis Weber asked a question about the offensive line. When you're watching the running game, what offensive lineman stood out to you as being the biggest issue?
There's one answer.
Oh man, I honestly, you're really putting me on the spot here, because I don't know if I could tell you like specifics as much as anything. I'm going to give the cop-out answer and say, as a D3 coach, the best one was Miners as a D3 guy, but that's not based on any kind of film study. That's just rooting for a guy.
That's a pretty safe guess, because when he took the field, it actually helped settle things down on the offensive line. It was more so trying to get a shot out there at the center, Lloyd Cushenberry, who hopefully is getting replaced this year. I mean, short arms, center-only prospect or center-only player that just doesn't have the athleticism, the lateral agility to really thrive in an outside zone scheme. So if that's what they're going to, it seems like that he's going to be moving on. Anyways, you messaged us saying that you had a question for us, Luke, so go ahead.
I do. I'm kind of curious to get your guys' take on this. I don't know if, I watched 3 games. I don't know if this was consistent. You guys have obviously watched a lot more of the Broncos than I have. When I watched the offense, when I watched clips when Javonte Williams was in the game, I noticed he seemed to be under center, as an under center back, a lot more than Melvin Gordon. I'm curious to kind of get your guys' take on that, because to me, that's actually easier for a running back, because you're able to have your eyes more or less on your keys, because you know that the exchange is coming at you, right? The first flaw of any running back is that they look at the mesh. You never want to look at the exchange point. You never want to look at the ball when the quarterback's giving it to you. You want your eyes already on your keys. You want your eyes already on your aiming points, and you're going to create a pocket for the quarterback just to be able to put the ball in there, right? So shotgun is in vogue these days because it's easier for quarterbacks, right? Because you've got 5 yards from you to the offensive line. You can see a fuller picture. It's a little bit tougher for the running backs because it's not always the most natural path. Going under center, this is the reason pistol became a huge thing, is because you kind of get the best of both worlds, right? When a quarterback turns his back, it looks like run. So play action becomes a little bit more effective, but also the quarterback's at that little bit of depth, right? So he can see a little bit more of the offense and the defense, I should say. So I'd be curious to get your guys' take if that just happened to be, and again, I didn't track this, I didn't chart this. It just felt like Javonte was the under center back a little bit more than Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon was the shotgun guy, because again, I think that kind of helps him as a running back, because it gives him a little bit more of a downhill. It gives him a little bit more of a clear picture.
That is something that it's actually interesting, because that's not something that I ever really noticed, consciously noticed or charted or anything like that. But going off of memory, I think earlier on in the season, it was definitely a lot more of that under center, quarterbacks under center, Javonte Williams behind him, and shotgun, Melvin Gordon's next to him. Later on in the season, it seemed to kind of vary up a little bit more. I do wonder how much of that was dealing with the quarterback, because it seemed to really change after Teddy Bridgewater got hurt and Drew Lock came in, who really did all right out of shotgun. Well, some of his best plays out of shotgun, I should say, which not hard to beat. But it also seemed that part of it could be a situation of just growing and developing Javonte Williams and getting him comfortable, and then getting him to a point where he could be comfortable doing a little bit more, asking a little bit more of him by moving to him off that offshoot running back and with the quarterback in shotgun.
Well, to piggyback off of that, I think that what you saw a lot with the Broncos down the stretch was it was a lot easier for Drew to read the defense when he was back off of the line of scrimmage. It gave him a more clearer picture for him. And with him, we all know how we feel about Drew and his inability to read defenses. When they actually moved him off the ball, that helped him a lot. There were times specifically in the Chiefs game in Week 17 where they had Drew under center in the red zone, and the Chiefs threw a 10-man box at him. They had one-on-one coverage on the outside with Tim Patrick, and they still ran the ball with Melvin Gordon. Famously, that play ended up being a fumble return for a touchdown. It was a 96-yard fumble return. So like that could be a part of that. I don't know what games you watched, but to see that kind of that narrative, it's an interesting thing to look at. Like Erick said, I didn't really conscientiously look at it like that. But I think another big aspect of that, not only is the quarterback able to read the field a little better, Drew Lock is actually a fairly decent athlete. He can move on the run. Teddy Bridgewater is not that kind of a guy. So maybe that might be something to add into there as well, is to see more of a Melvin Gordon as that early down back standing next to Drew Lock into the shotgun. And he works better that way. As far as Javonte Williams goes, there was a couple of different miscommunication things that you saw with him where he was supposed to be lined up, as specifically the first Chiefs game. He was lined up behind guard, not behind the quarterback on a play. It was a fourth down play that the Broncos ended up needing a touchdown or a score there late in the game, where Javonte Williams was lined up in the wrong spot. So I'm not sure exactly what to think of all of that. It's a very interesting point to notice, though. I'll have to take another look at that one of these days. And I know that sounds like a very convoluted answer. I'm trying to gather all my thoughts on that because there's so many different ways to look at that, because with the multiplicity of the Broncos offense going back to the quarterback play and everything with the two running backs, I didn't really focus in on something like that. So just kind of throwing out some more thoughts there.
Yeah, and that can be for any number of reasons: the quarterback, the running back, the scheme they're running. Yeah, no, I'm with you. It was something I'd noticed, and I was kind of curious to get your guys' thoughts on.
So I want to go back to the offensive line really fast here, as far as this wide zone is concerned. Have you got a chance to really kind of break down what the players look like as far as the offensive line was concerned? Graham Glasgow specifically, maybe even a Billy Turner. I know you said you watched the Matt LaFleur offense back in Green Bay from last season. What does Billy Turner's fit look like in this offense?
I'll be honest with you, I kind of focused more on like an overall offensive perspective for LaFleur. One thing I noticed with them is they were very similar, right? They ran a ton of different schemes. The one thing is, as I kind of watched film, the order I went in was Broncos offense, Seahawks offense to watch some Russell Wilson, and then Packers offense. And Broncos and Seahawks offenses looked, not in terms of what they ran, but formations, right? How they lined up before the play, before the snap, looked very similar, right? You had a lot of 11 personnel, 1 tight end, a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. They did a lot of what coaches would call a condensed split, right? Where the receivers are kind of lined in right next to the tackles. So they did a lot of things that kind of look similar. And then you turn on the Packers tape, and that looks very different. They line up in 21 personnel, which is not something I think I saw from either Seattle or Denver. They line up in empty, right? They do a lot of things offensively. And again, now that's hard for a defense to adjust to, right? Because you have to spend time throughout a week preparing for those, adjusting to all the different things you're going to see. Honestly, that makes it, usually that's going to make it easier on a quarterback, because some of those looks are going to make it easier because the defense can only line up so many ways to a certain look. It's going to make things a little bit easier on the offensive line. But at the same time now, if you're going to run a million different concepts out of those different formations, the quarterback and the offensive line have still got to be pretty damn good to get all those concepts executed. So there's kind of a trade-off of back and forth with all that as well.
Yeah, real quick, we got from Kenneth Booker coming in with the super chat. Thank you, Kenneth, for joining us. It says an anonymous Denver O-lineman said that Javonte tends to miss reads, and if he learned to make reads better, he could be the best running back in the league. And that was one of the things that I kind of touched on a little bit earlier when watching him last year, is that there was a lot of times where he seemed to just hit the wrong hole, run into the teeth of the defense instead of finding the open pathway that was there. And at times it put a little bit more pressure on the offensive line because, I mean, whenever the running back gets tackled for a loss or for a short gain, the blame goes on the offensive line. Sometimes deserved, sometimes not. And with Javonte, it wasn't always deserved there. But yeah, that definitely tracks with what I was able to see watching all the Denver games and everything. There was just so many times where Javonte just wasn't quite hitting it. And that could just be that issue of he's making this huge jump in level of competition to the NFL. I mean, again, talked about it before, even in Division I, Alabama jumping to the NFL, that's still a jump in competition. Some players handle it just fine. Some players, it takes a little bit of time. Most players, it takes a little bit of time. So we'll see how Javonte is. He should improve on it. That's something that he can definitely improve on. Go ahead, since you're the coach here, Luke, if you got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you want to give enough information as a coach to be able to get a point across, but you don't want to paralyze players, right? Paralysis by overanalysis. You want to give them enough to get through the play. You want enough for them to say, all right, if this, or this happens, I know what to do. If the wildest thing that happens, be an athlete, right? If the one thing that we don't expect them to do because it doesn't make sense because it's schematically unsound or it's, angles unsound, then be an athlete. For me, when I coach running backs, and again, it's been a little while for me, but my kind of thought process with them, and I told them this was, look, for me, you guys are coachable through the line of scrimmage, right? I'm going to coach your keys. I'm going to coach your aiming points. I'm going to coach your footwork. Once you hit the line of scrimmage, once you break the plane in the line of scrimmage, be an athlete, right? Be the guy we brought you here to be. Go be a football player in open space. If you use a spin move in the box and get yourself rocked, I'm going to coach you on that, but you're still coachable through the line of scrimmage, right? Once you get past that, go be an athlete.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Let's pivot off of this really fast. It's been really good to talk to the running game, but like I said at the start of the show, I've got a film breakdown on Nick Bonitto, the edge defender that the Broncos took out of Oklahoma at the number 64 overall pick. And we were talking before we went live behind the scenes here with Luke, specifically on his running, his play in the running game. And I was not a fan. There's a lot of play strength issues. The lack of length is something to be concerned about. But the one thing that you do notice when you watch him is the fact that he's such a good slasher. And there are some plays where he does a really good job with his technique as far as keeping his outside hand free. Now, Luke, as far as Nick Bonitto was concerned, you remember you were talking about the run fit, specifically on the 4-3 over front, or a guy that's a walk-up linebacker. Can you explain that just a little bit for everybody?
Yeah, definitely. So when you're structuring things from a defensive perspective, you need to have like a contain a force player, right? A guy whose job is to set the edge on the defense, to redirect and to make sure that the ball does not get outside of him. He has got to make sure that everything stacks up inside of him. It gets knocked back in because that's where his help is, right? It's not like he's on an island. He'll have if it's a say like a 3-by-1 offensive formation, right? There's 3 guys to the field, 1 guy into the boundary. That's the wide receiver. If you're that guy, you're the walk-up outside linebacker just inside of that, sure, you're going to have a corner and potentially a safety depending on the coverage behind you. But realistically, if you're the contained player, you need to knock everything back inside because that's where all your help is. So when you're doing that, the most important point is you want to keep your outside arm free, right? As soon as that outside arm gets blocked or that gets occupied by the blocker, then you've lost contain, right? That's what we kind of talked about from the offensive perspective of being reached. So one reason I kind of think that the 3-down defense is kind of coming into vogue so much these days is when you play a 3-down defense, you're going to have a defensive end who's lined up in more than likely one of 2 specific alignments, but possibly a third. Those are a 4 tech where he's aligned head up on an offensive tackle, a 4-eye where he's aligned just inside of that, kind of over the inside shoulder of the tackle, or he's a 5, right? Where now he's on the outside shoulder of the tackle. That one's way less common. So more often than not, you're going to have a 4 or a 4-eye. So those defensive ends, their responsibility for the most part is going to be to play the B gap, right? If I'm lined up over the right tackle, the ball is to my right. I'm thinking about this from a defensive perspective, right? The B gap is the gap just to my right. So that's easy for me to step in and occupy that gap. If there's any kind of run at me, I can step into that. And now that's really created a difficult angle for the offensive lineman because now they have to double that out to a stand-up, a walk-up edge defender outside of me who's the contained player. So 3-down creates a lot of issues for an offensive line because it creates unfavorable angles, right? That's a tough double team for them to double a guy who's right there to a guy who's just outside of him. Normally, when you double team, you want to be able to double team someone on the line of scrimmage through a second level defender, a linebacker, right? Because you now can displace that guy vertically. It's hard to displace a guy horizontally on a double team. So most offensive lines are going to say, well, we're not sure we can double team this. Let's just single block the defensive end with the guard and now send the tackle out to the walk-up edge linebacker. So when it comes to like outside zone, that's a tough picture for them, right? Because it's putting a lot of stress on the offensive line. And so even for a guy like Bonitto, again, is he going to be able to win against every offensive tackle in the NFL? Absolutely not. He's undersized, right? He's going to have issues with bigger offensive tackles in the league. But the angles in a 3-down defense, if that's what Denver chooses to kind of live in, that's going to give him a lot of support, because at the end of the day, then that's a harder angle for a tackle. And as long as he keeps that outside arm free, knocks everything back inside, he's done his job.
Yeah, and that's definitely some really good points there. And Denver, I've hounded on Nick Bonitto in his run defense. Lance has, Nick has. We all have some, even from the moment Denver drafted him. That was our big concern there. And one thing too that consistently goes unmentioned with this is that Denver has the ability to give time to him, using him as a pass rush specialist early on, which with his bend, his explosion, and athleticism he can bring, they can give him the time to work and improve as a run defender with Randy Gregory, with Bradley Chubb. The concern is that you don't want them to get hurt, obviously for their sake, and also for Nick Bonitto, because you don't want him out there before he's ready to handle the NFL running game. Going back to the offensive line real quick, because we had a couple questions on it. I wanted to get Lance's talk on this for a second. Travis Weber came in and says, another question for Luke, Eric, and Lance. Give me your starting offensive lineup. I think Luke will probably bow out of this question just because he's not very familiar with the current landscape for the offensive line. But for me, how I think this offensive line is going to start right now, based on everything I've heard, is left tackle Garrett Bowles. That's the one position I think is 100% cemented in.
Yeah.
Then you have your left guard, which seems to be a competition there, but it seems to be Dalton Reisner's job to lose. And if you lose it, it's probably Tom Compton. I still think Dalton Reisner's the guy there for now. We'll see what happens. Center, I think it's going to end up Lloyd Cushenberry. I think the main battle is between Graham Glasgow and dealing with his height for Russell Wilson, or Lloyd Cushenberry and dealing with his issues. And I think that they're going to stick with the issues there. Luke Wattenberg, I don't think is ready yet. And I think Quinn Miners is not cemented at guard. I just think that's where they'd prefer to keep him. He still has a chance at center, though. Simply kind of making this the word totally escaped me now. The compromise of good player and height. Quinn Miners is kind of the compromise between Cushenberry and Glasgow, and then Billy Turner at left tackle. So Bowles, Reisner, Cushenberry, Miners, Turner.
I'm surprised you kept Cushenberry in the starting fold there, because I'm going to go in a little bit different direction here. I think that Dalton Reisner might be a little bit more on the hot seat than everybody wants to kind of put out there. He's been playing pretty well. Let's be honest. He hasn't been playing the greatest. He's been playing pretty well. I think that there's a lot of issues. His rookie year, he was kind of compensating a little bit for Garrett Bowles and the struggles that he had on the left tackle side. But then his second year, he was kind of compensating a little bit for the center issues with Lloyd Cushenberry. And then again, this last year with Lloyd Cushenberry, but it hasn't really come together for him. So I think there's a conversation to be had with him and Tom Compton, or even potentially Graham Glasgow on that center position. Garrett Bowles to me is a lock. Let's be real here. Like that's the guy we all know. Garrett Bowles, let me thump my chest one time, the all-pro left tackle. That's the guy there. I think that Reisner might still be able to win that position, but it's going to be a tough fight for him between Compton and with Graham Glasgow. Now, the other one is going to be with Lloyd Cushenberry in the center position. I think that he's pretty much done. I think Quinn Miners is going to be a perfect fit there. And then Tom Compton at the right guard, Billy Turner at the left guard. So you could see the line. This is what I'm going to finalize my prediction as: Garrett Bowles, Dalton Reisner, Quinn Miners, Tom Compton, and then Billy Turner at the right tackle position. And give a shout out to Calvin Anderson, who everybody seems to think that he's got a pretty good opportunity to win that right tackle spot, but that's where I would go.
No, just based off what I heard, it seems like Graham Glasgow's either center or right guard. Tom Compton's either right tackle or left guard. Doesn't seem like he's going to be in part of the competition there at right guard, and same thing with Graham Glasgow at left. And Calvin Anderson, he's basically cemented. He's the backup swing tackle. He's basically
Well, this isn't a fair conversation then, because if you're going to pull out your sources and stuff like that, you asked me for my prediction, and I'm giving you my prediction. You're going to throw out – this isn't fair. Luke, tell him off, please. For real, though, we got a couple of super chats here I want to grab here. Kenny jumping back in here saying, what is Randy Gregory capable of just based on his traits, Eric?
I mean, his pass rush win rate, his ability, his pressure rate, was just insane for as little as he's played. If he stays healthy out there, I mean, he could be a great pass rusher in the NFL. I don't want to say one of the best because, I mean, you got the Bosa brothers, Myles Garrett. You've got some outstanding edge defenders out there. But he could probably be there towards that top end of that second tier of edge rushers in the NFL if he's able to stay out there on the field and stay healthy. Super good athlete. He's got pretty good strength. He's pretty good athletically. There's some issues there against the run, but he's not as bad as some other guys. Malik Reed in particular, that's the biggest one you want to upgrade against the run. And Nick Bonitto, as much crap as we give him, he's much better as a run defender than Malik Reed is. But Randy Gregory, athlete, strong, so quick. And he's one thing that's undersold with him is that his hands are violent, and that's something that you like to have from your edge defenders. He doesn't like when offensive linemen's hands get on him, and he's consistently swiping to get them off of him.
Yeah. Another thing that you got to focus on with Randy Gregory is his ability to dip his shoulder down with his hips are super flexible, and his ankle strength. Like when he leans into a blocker, his ankle strength to be able to drive and push through that with that ridiculous bend in his play strength is so much fun to watch. Go back to his tape at Nebraska where he was just dominating people, and he probably would have been a first-round pick if he wouldn't have gotten all that trouble. We're dealing with a shoulder injury. Obviously, we have the surgery he's got to kind of get through. I don't think that that's going to be a problem with him going into the 2022 season, but there is something definitely to look at there. I think that Randy Gregory, like Erick said, probably the top end of the tier 2 level. You're like where Von Miller was at last year, the last 8-game stretch where he had 9 sacks in 8 games, you're probably not going to see something like that. But if you can get a good stretch of the similar play that Von Miller had when he was in Denver, the ability to play against the run, which isn't necessarily great, but the ability to get after the passer on every single down, his play strength, his speed, his freak athleticism, like there's a lot that you can work with there. So I like Randy Gregory, especially as a fit in this defense. Coming up next year. Oh, go ahead, Erick. Sorry.
I wanted to grab this one too real quick so we can get off the offensive line. Peter Middleton says, who's your surprise roster cut or surprise starter in this offensive line? As much as I liked him coming out of college, he fell for medical reasons. He just doesn't fit with what the offense wants to do. And his arms are ridiculously short. Natani Moody is my surprise roster cut. And surprise starter, I think Tom Compton would be the only real option here. I think that he's got a decent chance at right tackle, but he's got a decent chance at left guard as well.
I still think Quinn Miners at center. Like that would be a surprise to me. I think that you probably keep him at the right guard position, but if there was a chance for a surprise, it would be Quinn Miners at the center position.
So you're willing, with Russell Wilson in town, you're willing to move a guy who was fine at right guard, showing his growth at right guard, to center position where he had issues snapping the ball and making the proper reads for the offensive line, to being the center position for Russell Wilson.
So I guess the thinking behind that is there's at least room for him to grow. And with Russell Wilson being as short as he is at the quarterback position, Graham Glasgow's 6'6". Lloyd Cushenberry's liability in the pass game and the running game. So you got a guy that plays with physicality. You've got a guy that plays with good strength. You've got a guy that plays with good athleticism. He can get out and run. You can learn and with having a veteran quarterback behind him that can help him understand those line concepts and stuff like that, that can help that communication, help reset the line protections at the line of scrimmage. Like that to me is a better fit because there's just so much more moldability with him. He's a ball of clay at this particular point. So that to me makes the most sense. And if you're going to let Tom Compton and Graham Glasgow battle it out at right guard or even the left guard spot with Dalton Reisner, I would go in that direction, just specifically based on those factors. I hope that line of thinking, and Luke, please, hopefully that line of thinking makes sense to everybody.
Well, first and foremost, you asked me to check Erick here. I've been trying for years, man, and I haven't gotten through. So the one thing I will jump in with this is this. You know, people talk about Peyton Manning being incredible at the line of scrimmage because he was, and he was able to reset protections and get the offense into the right look. A guy like Russell Wilson is going to be able to come in and do that, right? He's going to recognize the defense. He's going to recognize where a blitz is coming. He's going to see the coverage. He's going to be able to shift protections and get the offensive line to be on the same page. You know, if there's a blitz coming, he's going to identify it, right? He's going to slide the protection to it. That's fine. He's going to have to do that with all three of the centers that we're talking about right now, right? Because none of them have worked with Russell Wilson before. We're talking about Glasgow, Cushenberry, Miners, right? None of them have done that before. The only difference is Miners has never done that as a center before. And here's the other thing that I don't think people talk about enough. The offensive line still has to communicate, right? If you're running inside zone left and you get up to the line of scrimmage, you still have to talk through, I'm doubling with you, you're going to be single on this guy, whatever the case is. Power, hey, I'm doubling back through here. We're going to identify this guy as, when teams call the Mike, that's how, when they say, number 50 is the Mike, 50 is the Mike, that's telling the entire offense, hey, we're setting our run scheme off of this guy. A lot of the time, if it's power, they're calling that guy out and saying, hey, we're pulling for this guy, and everything else goes off of the protections or off of the blocking scheme from there, right? If it's pass protection and, they're based on the protection, either they're sliding to that guy or away from that guy, right? Who's calling the mic in the offense? I would venture to guess it's going to be Russell Wilson, right? He's going to identify that guy as the protection. He's going to be smart enough in the run game to say, hey, again, if it's power, right, and we're pulling for number 50, he's going to say, hey, 50's the mic, 50's the mic. That's going to allow the offensive line from there just to say, all right, we know 50's the mic. I've got a one tech here. That means the center of the guard are going to double that guy back through the next linebacker. The left guard's going to pull for number 50, right? So a guy like Russell Wilson, the nice thing about him is he takes a lot of stress off the shoulders of the center because he's going to do so much in terms of identifying that guy in the run of the pass game. Your issue really is going to be making sure that guy's on the same page with Russell Wilson. Like Peyton Manning famously was kind of a jerk about that. Like when a guy came in, read a great article on this not that long ago. Dan Copen was a center who came over from the Patriots. He'd worked with Tom Brady. He gets into the room with Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning asked entirely different things of him. He had a great anecdote about, I think he got hurt in training camp for the first couple of weeks of the season or something like that, came into the starting lineup late in the year, and Peyton Manning, in practice one day, audibles, hey, yellow, yellow, yellow. They hadn't audibled yellow as a protection since they installed it the day back in training camp. That's what elite quarterbacks do. Is they had the access to everything they need, the full arsenal of stuff. Is the center in front of them going to be able to work with them and understand what that means? That's a different question.
Yeah, that's actually a good point there. I mean, having that thing, it's just, I don't know. I just look at it a little bit differently. Trusting, I mean, you're going to be trusting Quinn Miners no matter what for Russell Wilson. It's just moving him to that new spot, which, hey, it's a new feel. I mean, we talk about interior offensive linemen basically being interchangeable. You still have to learn a little bit, some differences, some variations there. One of the biggest being snapping the ball. May not be what Russell Wilson will want to deal with. But Mike Ronquillo came in with a $20 donation saying, great show tonight, Lance. Eric with Coach Luc on Dove Valley Deep Divers. Let's ride and go Broncos. Thank you, Michael. We appreciate your support.
Thanks,
not just tonight, but every single night. Not just Dove Valley Deep Divers, but every single show. You're consistent. You're definitely one of the stars of the Huddle Up Podcast Network.
Yeah, Michael's a great supporter, man. I wish we get an opportunity to meet you sometime. Go down to one of these Mile High Huddle meetups. Like last year, we did the one at the Jets game. I know that there was one in Vegas to be able to meet some more of these people. We need to organize another one of these things and have a lot more fun with the rest of the community. We thank everybody for joining us in here on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Now, last couple things here before we get out of here. So, guys, if you have any questions for Luke, make sure you get them in super chats, get your stars and stuff like that. We finally got Scout Kennedy, Scott, behind the scenes here to help us kind of moderate the chat just a little bit. So thanks, Scott, for joining us. Finally, geez, I can't believe you're late, dude. No, I'm just playing. But any questions for Luke specifically regarding the scheme? Anything we've discussed over tonight so far? Make sure you get them in super chat, get your stars, donations, and stuff like that. We'll answer as many as possible. Now, I want to pivot here. Actually, Eric, what do you got? You're dying to speak here.
The other aspect of what I asked Luke to look into was the receivers, primarily how they fit with Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson notoriously doesn't like the middle of the field, whether it's because he's been behind tall centers all his career at in Seattle with Ethan Pochik.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy before him, both of them were like 6'5", 6'6", or just preference or whatever the case may be. He doesn't like to target the middle of the field. Nathaniel Hackett's offense, with what we saw in Green Bay, assuming he's bringing over the passing game there, as he's kind of touched on a little bit, didn't really like to target the middle of the field a whole lot. Nathaniel Hackett spoke on it about targeting and attacking the boundaries. So these receivers, any receiver hurt by the potential lack of desire to attack the middle of the field?
I mean, based purely on the desire to not attack the middle of the field, you'd have to say Jerry Jeudy by default, right? He's the slot receiver. That being said, I think he translates incredibly well into the offense. I think he's dynamic. I think he's a matchup over the middle. I think he's excuse me, I think he's a matchup issue over the middle, right? I think he's going to give linebackers and safeties and even nickel corners, to what extent they get used, I think he's going to give them issues because he's incredibly sudden, right? So when I talk about being sudden, that means a receiver who's able to change direction with limited to no wasted movement, right? That he's able to be fluid in and out of breaks. He's able to step on defenders' toes and challenge them vertically and then snap that off. So to me, when I watched his tape, I thought he was really dynamic. Honestly, I don't know what the situation was last year. He feels a lot farther now, having watched his tape, than the bust that I know people have kind of started to think of him as. Again, he's a dynamic playmaker, and I'm curious to see how they use him. The one thing I will say that LaFleur seems to really love is, and I don't want to call these simple concepts by any means, like they're in the NFL, teams run them in high school, college, the NFL, like a concept's a concept. Like even this, the kind of the one thing that always cracks me up is in the pre-draft process, whenever they get the quarterbacks on the whiteboards and they say, all right, explain your favorite play. Number one, every quarterback goes on there, explains 4 verts. If you've ever noticed that, every single quarterback talks about their favorite deep concept because chicks dig the long ball. But also because 4 verts, even in and of itself, right, is still an incredibly complex concept, right? Because you're still reading safety, rotation, you're still going through a progression. So I don't want to call these easy concepts by any means, but you've got things like stick, snag, slants, like your Y cross, a lot of really classic kind of quick game concepts that are designed to get the ball out in rhythm, but also some full field progression reads that are pretty universal, right? Like Y cross, we think of as being the Mike Leach, the air raid play. All it is it's a full field progression going back to a drag and a dig. Like that is a pretty universal NFL concept. Like Sean McVay has made a killing in Los Angeles being able to hit the backside dig on things. So to me, in terms of concepts, there's a lot of stuff in there that's going to be really quarterback friendly. There's nothing in there where he's going to have to do too much. To me, a lot of those things seem like quick and easy things where hopefully you can get into camp, you can get through the first few days of camp and make sure, hey, we're going to make sure Russell Wilson is on the same page with Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, because these are all incredibly quarterback and receiver-friendly concepts that, again, most teams universally are going to run. We're going to package them differently. We're going to call them different things. But hopefully you guys should have all run these since, kindergarten, right? These are base football concepts.
And one thing that you mentioned that stands out is quarterback friendly. Aaron Rodgers, when he's been asked about Nathaniel Hackett, it was always quarterback friendly. You're talking about the offensive scheme there in Green Bay, quarterback friendly. Russell Wilson, in one of his press conferences here after he arrived, he was talking about how the offensive scheme that they're working on putting together, him and Hackett and Justin Alton, is quarterback friendly, and that's something that they obviously wanted to do. But yeah, with Jerry Jeudy, I mean, obviously it points that he's a slot receiver. He's going to be used most to protect the middle of the field, but it's not all he can do. I mean, he can do so much for an offense. That's why when he came out, he was viewed as not just a slot receiver, but as a boundary slot, that versatile guy that can move in and out depending on the look you want to give them. And that's something that I'm pretty sure we'll see with KJ Hamler in town as well, depending on his health. Expectations will be ready to go for the season, is just see plenty of variation. So I don't think that any of the wide receivers really take a hit. I think the bigger hit is going to come from the tight end position and their utilization in the passing game. But Lance, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, and Travis, we'll get to this here in just a second here. Let's do this first and get Luke's intake, and I'll get this question in here in a second. But Travis jumping in here saying, Luke, how do you feel about Denver wanting Baron Browning into the mix of outside linebacker and edge rusher? Do you agree or disagree, or should they be better off keeping him inside? Now, Baron Browning, I'm not sure, Luke, if you've got a chance to take a look at him, but we're talking an incredibly athletic kind of a kid, so he can play on the outside, play on the inside, pretty decent in pass coverage. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, so to be honest, I didn't watch him in 2021. This is going to be kind of a take based on his Ohio State film from the pre-draft process, or from the draft process, I should say. To me, the only thing that's logical there is if you feel like you've got the guys at inside linebacker, that you want to keep developing him at outside linebacker. Because realistically, once he moves position, if you were to move position to inside linebacker, just as if you were to move position to cornerback or running back, right? Anytime you move a guy from one position to another, which I'm not suggesting moving him to either of those two things. I'm just saying that you'll kind of see that a little bit more at the college or high school level, right? Some of the base athleticism translates, right? Like there is absolutely no difference on how a wide receiver is pressed by a cornerback as opposed to how an edge rusher gets off of a tackles block, right? There are certain things to football that are fundamental, universal athletic things. But so much of what defensive players are asked to do now with their eyes and their hands, in terms of where they're putting their eyes on their keys, in terms of how they're using their hands taking on blocks, those can change pretty dramatically inside to outside. To me, and again, this is not based on any kind of evaluation of the talent at either position, Denver feels a lot deeper at outside linebacker right now than they do inside linebacker. So to me, that says that either they don't see Browning being a part of the equation this year at outside linebacker, and they're happy to keep him there for a year and develop him, or they say, hey, we've got enough at inside linebacker, we don't need him there, we can let him develop at outside linebacker. Or they say, hey, this is a guy who's such a good dynamic playmaking athlete that we're okay with living with some growing pains if we have to move him back to inside linebacker. I can't say which one of the three it is, but it's, in my opinion, almost always is going to be one of those three things.
And with him there's just this hybrid role that they want him to play. He'll still play off ball, he'll still play edge. And for me, based off of some conversations, based off of how they've talked about it, it seems like with his athleticism and his versatility, they just want to keep him on the field. They want to teach him basically to be this multi-tool, this Swiss Army pocket knife kind of thing, and just leave him out there on the field, which kind of comes back to Jeff Noyes' question is how many linebackers will Denver utilize in their base defense? Well, the projection is based off what the Los Angeles Rams have done, based off of comments from Evero, is that their base defense is going to be a 5-1-5 look. So not much need for multiple linebackers there. And with Browning, he could be possibly one of those edges at times, or he can be that inside linebacker and just really lean on that athleticism that he has.
Yeah. Jeff, that's a great question here. I got another good one for you, Luke, before we round this out and kind of get out of here. We're almost at an hour, but I want to go back to Michael Ronquillo says, I like our new special teams coach, Dwayne Stukes, because he's bringing nasty back into the special teams for the Denver Broncos. And Luke, I know this pulls at your heartstrings because linebackers and running backs, they don't matter unless they're playing special teams, and then they matter a lot.
Well, as a new special teams coordinator, just don't even ask me how much running backs and linebackers matter, because those are some of your best guys on special teams. No, special teams is awesome, and like special teams, I think is so overlooked and so underrated as a key component of the game. Like it's a third of the game. And again, like what I was saying before, like the fundamentals of football translate on special teams. Like to me, you take punt is kind of the consummate ultimate special teams play, which not really many people are going to think about it that way, but it is at its core, at its heart, it is an offensive play, right? You've got 10 guys who are going to block, or they're going to get downfield, and you want to protect as long as you can so that a guy can get rid of the football, right? That sounds like offense. But as soon as that ball leaves the punter's foot, now you've got 11 guys running down the field trying to make a play on the ball carrier, which sounds like defense. To me, offense and defense and special teams. Special teams is just an extension of offense and defense. It's just an extension of what a team does in a football game. Again, I'm passionate about it. I have to be. It's on my business card. But no, special teams is awesome, and I don't think people give it enough credit. Honestly, if I'm being honest with you guys, like NFL special teams by and large are not the most exciting schemes in the world, right? Everyone kind of runs to some extent a vanilla kind of version that is more or less like the next guy on the block. So what really separates that is going to be the players that you can put on special teams, the impact that those guys will bring.
Yeah, that's a great way to break that down. Peter Middleton jumping in here. I'm surprised with some of the recent cuts, Andre Mintz and Sean Beyer especially. Eric, any thoughts?
I mean, I think that they were both kind of expected. Sean Beyer, it seemed like there was hype for him entering last year, but it didn't ever seem to materialize. And then Andre Mintz is a situation of they just brought in Nick Bonitto. They signed Chris Allen. They brought in Randy Gregory. They have depth at the position for competition's sake. And Andre Mintz just is a little cleaning up the clutter a little bit. They needed to clear up a little bit of room because they only had 10 roster spots open, and they signed 13 college free agents. So they had to open up some extra space for it. I think they're currently at 89 players, and they still have 2 of their draft picks assigned, so they might still see one cut unless I miss something.
Yeah. I want to jump back into this really fast, the whole Jerry Jeudy conversation before we grab Peter. I know you've got another UDFA question, and post it again here really fast at the bottom, and we'll answer that here in a second as well. But I want to go back to Jerry Jeudy really fast. With this Nathaniel Hackett offense, the Matt LaFleur offense, with the way that the Packers were able to utilize a guy that's a quick twitch route runner with a little bit bigger body than what Jerry Jeudy has in Javonte Adams. Do you think, Luke, that this could be the role for Jerry Jeudy specifically? Like, look at what Javonte Adams was able to do in the red area, like where they motioned him across the line of scrimmage, get a quick up and out, get him out into the flat, get the ball into his hands quickly, and let him kind of create at the second level. Is that something that we could see with the Broncos utilizing Jerry Jeudy more than like a Cortland Sutton or a Tim Patrick?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one thing that the Packers have done really consistently over the last few years is, in my opinion, they've been one of the most creative teams in the league in the red zone. Is just how much they do that gives a defense issues with being able to use their guys, right? Their playmakers. And to me, kind of as I went back and watched the film, the Packers do so many different unique things. Like they had Alan Lazard, right? Who's the big bodied wide receiver. They had him as the puller on counter, right? Like that is such kind of an alien thing to do because that's normally a tight end or a fullback who's going to do that as the guy who's going to pull across a formation and take on a linebacker. Now, if you look at the numbers, Lazard's 6'5", 227, but Cortland Sutton's 6'4", 216, Tim Patrick 6'4", 212. Like if you want to get non-traditional, if you want to get exotic and funky, you could probably do that with those guys. So that to me is I'm very curious to see just what Hackett does. LaFleur obviously moves his pieces around. He's going to do what he can to maximize the components he's got. To me, at the end of the day, any kind of offensive coach, I want to kind of look at them and judge them. What do they do to get the ball to their best playmakers? How are they going to do that? Because at the end of the day, you can move chess pieces around, right? We're talking about some of the best athletes in the game of football on the planet Earth. These guys can do a lot of things for you. Is Jerry Jeudy, from an athletic and a route running understanding capability standpoint, Davante Adams? No, because Davante Adams is a top probably 1 or 2 receiver on the planet. But can you move those chess pieces around and can you be incredibly creative with the way that you scheme things up to give him space, especially in the red zone? Yeah, no question. Like Hackett's been doing that kind of at the knee of, again, like I said, LaFleur, I think is a guy who's done that really consistently well over the last couple of years.
All right. So before we get out of here and wrap this up, going to put you on the spot again. Record prediction for the season. What is it?
Oh man. Well, first and foremost, my brain always defaults to 16 game schedules. So you guys got to remember, I'm still new to the 17 game schedule as well. Honestly, like I'm not just saying this. Everyone says it these days. AFC West is brutal, right? It is not even close to as smooth a journey out as it would be in the NFC South for the Buccaneers, right? So I don't know, man. I think it's going to be a slaughterhouse. I think the AFC West is just going to be an absolute bloodbath. I think any team that goes 500 or better in the AFC West is going to be really happy with themselves. Ideally, I think the ceiling for a Russell Wilson led team is going to be somewhere in the realm of like a 12-6 or 12-5. See, I'm screwing it up. But I think
it's all right. We were told there was going to be no math. You're fine.
I know. First you spring the 1,000-yard season on me, now this. But especially with a new head coach, new quarterback, and by definition a very new offense, like I think they're going to be growing pains year one, and I think that's okay because this is not a team that has to win right now. I think honestly, some challenges and some struggles for them to go through this year is going to serve them better in the long run. So realistically, I think 9-8. 10-7 are kind of good targets to hit this year. Again, if they come out and surprise really everyone and have a phenomenal year, I don't think 12-13 wins are out of the question. But I don't think a 10-7 season is by any means a failing grade for them. I think that's still like they're performing well at that point.
All right, guys. So if Denver does worse than 9-8, make sure you get Atlanta or Luke for jinxing it. If they do just 9-8 or 10-7, get at Luke for jinxing it. And if they do better, just get at Luke for how much he sucks.
That's the truth. No, for real though, guys.
We appreciate you joining.
Luke is great. It's always fun to have him on because every time we have him on, I learn something new about like just conceptually understanding football. And we do Eric and I do a great job of trying to understand as much as we possibly can. We identify the traits and we talk about the players and stuff like that. But Luke does a really good job of pulling it all together. And like I said, when we were talking about Nick Bonitto earlier today and how the run fits and stuff like that, pull all together and why the Broncos went in that direction and how Oklahoma was using Nick Bonitto, it made so much more sense. It actually opened my eyes up to his run defense just a little bit more, and to have his expertise, the coaching expertise that he has is just always great. And Luke, we really appreciate you for joining on with us, man. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, as always, guys, thanks so much for the opportunity to have me. As Erick said, if you want to tweet me any crap, feel free. My handle is at NickHendel, MHH.
Yes.
Kidding.
Yes.
But as always, guys, thank you so much for the opportunity to have me. I love talking about football. I love getting to talk about the Broncos. And again, hopefully every time I come on here, I hope everyone can kind of learn a little bit more, because I am by no means a football expert. Every time I get into a room with someone smarter than I am, I learn something as well. So I appreciate you guys. And like I said, I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk some ball.
Well, at least Lance always learns something.
Well, hey, easy. You learned some stuff from me too, Eric. I know you do. Maybe my hot takery nonsense, whatever the hell it's called, but you at least learned something from me too. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Thank you all for joining us, by the way, and thank you for again to Luke for educating all of us. You guys can follow us on Twitter by finding me at Sanderson MHH, for Eric at Erick Trickel. Notice it's CKEL. Get that spelling right, because you can go and hound him like I do. And also at Luc Polglaze for Coach Luke, at Scout Kennedy for Scott, who joined the show late, and thanks for Scott for joining us. Also, guys, make sure you guys are following at DVDD_pod. That's a podcast account where you're going to find out what we're talking about every single Friday night. Also, again, guys, at Mile High Huddle. That's the mother account where you guys are going to find breaking news and analysis regarding your Denver Broncos, film breakdowns, all of our draft content, everything that's going to go on over the offseason, stuff like that. You're going to find it at Mile High Huddle. Also, guys, if you are financially able to do so, please head on over to huddleuppod.com. That's the merch tent, guys. That's where you're going to get yourself a hat. You've got a t-shirt. You've got a face mask. You've got a coffee cup. There's a onesie for your baby, if that's your bag, something for the guys, something for the gals, anything that you would like to support your favorite show or Mile High Huddle in general, huddleuppod.com. That's where you guys are going to find it. Facebook supporters, again, facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. It's a great way to help support the show on Facebook. Join into that conversation, get some new friends and stuff, new followers and stuff like that. It's a great way to kind of help tie our community together. And guys, if you're not financially able to do so with super chats, go into the merch tent, anything like that, 3 things everybody should be doing at this point. We've been 3 years on this podcast, going on 4, it seems like. But we got subscribe, guys. Wherever you guys are watching this, YouTube specifically, but Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Periscope, it does not matter. Anywhere you guys find your Mile High Huddle podcast, subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video you guys see across all social media platforms. And if you love it, share it, guys. Share it out in front of as many Broncos fans as humanly possible, because without your guys' support, we could not do what we do best, which is cover your Denver Broncos. Now, with that, Eric, I usually throw it out to you first, but I'm going to throw this one to Luke first. Any last words before we get out of here, man?
No, honestly, again, just thank you guys for the opportunity. Always appreciate it. Always appreciate the platform you guys have, and just putting up with me talking a little bit of football for you.
Well, thanks, Luke. Eric, what's up, dude?
Well, in a way, Luke, I mean, this is a platform that you helped build. I don't know if many people know this, but back when I first started, it was Chad, Luke, and I. Not for Mile High Huddle. That eventually came a little bit later. I don't think you were ever officially part of Mile High Huddle. I think you left. You were there at the beginning.
I was for like a couple months way at the beginning.
Yeah. I could remember if you left just before or not long after it started, but I mean, he's a good friend of it. I mention always. It's godfather to my daughter, which some point he's got to come up here and visit her again. Hasn't seen her since she was a baby, and now she's almost 5 years old. But I think a fair trade here for getting you on the show is you coming for a visit, but we'll talk about that some other time. But thank you guys for joining us. It's been awesome, and it's of course always awesome to have Luke join the show.
Yeah, it's always great to have Luke on. It's never great to have Eric on, and it's the worst thing ever to see my face. So, but thank you all for joining us. Programming note, really fast, guys. Next week I will be on the show, but the week after that I will not be, because I am going to be getting married on May 28th. So I will not be joining the show. But it's making a mistake. I don't know about that. So the more that the closer that we get to this, first off, I'm so excited. But secondly, it's like the most confident in any decision I've ever made in my life. Like, quite honestly, I'm at that point where like, I know that this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I cannot wait for it to just be done and over with. Because quite honestly, the stress going into it is really pumping up my blood pressure. But Anyways, guys, with that, we will see you all same time, same place next week here on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. You all stay safe and take care. Have a great weekend. And as always, go Broncos.